Hey guys, it's Jen. Welcome back to the farm, or welcome to the farm if you haven't been here before. I wanted to talk a little bit today about farm infrastructure, but specifically about electrical. And the only reason I thought of this was because we had a storm pop up the other day that reminded me of the giant two-stage project we had to do regarding electrical and why we did it. Sorry, I had a little person that likes to sit and play in my truck. But the other day we had a storm pop up and it reminded us of derecho, which some people call it derecho. There is no I in it, but for some reason we still call it derecho. And if I'm able to, I'll insert some photos in a second showing some of the carnage that happened. And we were nowhere near as bad as some other people. Like, we know somebody who had $1 million grain complex that was destroyed. So, and then a couple years later, I started working for the insurance company that is our insurance provider, and we would still have, you know, not great claims. We didn't have a derecho event, but the Midwest was really hit hard, especially over in Iowa. But I mean, we had, like I said, we had some major losses in our area. So I'll insert some photos with a description right here, and so you can see what I'm talking about. Sorry if you hear Ellie in the background playing, but this is what we came home to. We had some guys that had worked on an addition to the barn, or redoing an addition to the barn, and they said, you might want to come home, your barn is gone. And I was like, what do you mean gone? And they said, gone. So this is where the building was. And it was literally gone. It like blew up, and it twisted and turned. It impaled into the machine shed you see there. It was 500 yards out into the field, and the farmer thankfully let us go get it. He did still find some during harvest, but it wasn't as bad as having to stop every time during harvest. These were some of the branches that came down, and not nearly as many as what we actually had in that picture. The wind hit the house, blew the air conditioner over, blew a window out in the basement. Luckily, the trees didn't come out on the house. The pressure was great enough that it blew Colton's back truck window from the inside out. So we don't know if we actually got hit by a tornado or if it was just a sudden change in pressure. And this is where the electric got pulled off the house. It took some siding with it, which wasn't surprising, but it did pull the electric from the house. And then this is some of the barn in the neighbor's field. He had a pretty hefty loss from the damage anyway, so the crop insurer was out doing aerials of the crop damage. But this is once again where the barn used to be, and it's just all the debris and everything that we had to clean up. It took forever, and it was not fun. So as you can see, we kind of came home to a disaster. Starting with the barn being gone, and then the electrical. There were lines down everywhere, and our provider said, don't get out, don't touch anything, don't hit the main line, because, you know, we could have gotten zapped. I mean, the power was out everywhere. Should have thought of that. But, you know, they have to advise safety. But we had animals, and the power company wasn't even able to come by for like 2 days, and there was no way that I could just let the animals sit in the house outside not knowing what was going on, especially needing to get water. And if you're not familiar, if you live in a like city or a town or something, when the power goes out you still have water. Well, in the country, if the power goes out, it can't pump the water. So we had to find water for our animals. Luckily we didn't have the horses here, but we did have the dog and cats in the house, and the chickens, and we had parents that still had power that we could get water from, or the store wasn't completely out. It was during, you know, 2020, so there were plenty of other things out. Thank goodness not water at that time anyway. But the power lines being down, completely down, that was huge. That was a safety concern if the power had been on in the area. But it was just a lot of devastation. It was very shocking to come up the drive and find what we did. I can't even describe it, and it really wreaked a lot of havoc on us. So anyway, this is why I wanted to talk about electrical infrastructure on your farm. And it is not a cheap thing. It is, or can be, quite expensive. Now, I need to put a disclaimer in here stating that I am not an electrician. I'm not licensed. This is the state of Illinois. So there are different laws per state, per county, I don't know. So if you're doing any electrical stuff, consult someone who knows something, not me. So this is just strictly my/our perspective. But when we got hit, I'm trying to think, this big maple tree behind us had a couple branches down. It's old and it's gradually rotting out, but it pulled the wire from our house, completely tore it off, so we had no electricity to the house. Luckily, we were able to get a hold of a guy that could put it on right away until we could get electric service from the main line. But there were poles, telephone poles sheared off. So, I mean, the companies even had to replace poles before we could really get electric to our area. But it pulled that off the house, which knocked out our freezers and everything. The rest of the buildings, it wasn't that big of a deal because there weren't really any livestock in there. But the first phase of our electric project that we did was, one, upgrading to this thing. This was the original box and shut off. We haven't dismantled that yet, but this is the new one. And you'll notice there's also space here because at some point we'd like to put in a whole home generator of some sort in case the power does go out again for an extended period of time. We can flip the generator on, or when we're old, you know, when the power goes out in winter, we have an option. But this is our new meter and main box here. But the other thing is, I don't know if you can see the transformer on that electrical pole. So this is what you call a transformer. At least that's what we call it around here. This is where the electrical company ends and our responsibility starts, basically. And the electrical transformer is there to, I don't know all the technical terms, but it's to convert the huge amperage going through the lines into something that you can use on your property, and it's to reduce the amount going to the rest of your property. So from the electrical transformer, we had to dig a trench, and we do have blacktop here in this section of our driveway, but we dug a trench, probably, I want to say it's probably about 120 feet or something, I can't remember, to our main box. And the electrical company did have to put that in because it had to be a certain grade wire, and they have to hook it up to the transformer. And then your electrician, or you, but this is something that I would prefer to pay an electrician for, needs to hook it up to your main box. And then your main box is kind of where you need to decide how much amperage you're going to end up using on your farm. And I can't tell you all the technical terms and stuff because it's been a few years since we did it, and I only know so much about electric. I know enough to get by. But from your main box, which this is our meter, and then this is our main box. And from your main box, that's where you decide where everything is going to go. So we have a ground wire going in here. This is where the transformer wire comes in, ground wire, and then these are all where various things go. One goes to the house, one goes to the garage, one goes out to the barns, and I honestly can't remember what the fourth one goes to, but they go down in the ground. And then you have to trench, and then we trench to each location. A lot of people go above ground, which is the way we were. We still have wires above ground connected to some buildings. that we haven't gotten down yet. But the reason we went underground is because during that storm, we had wires pulled off the house, we had wires on the ground, and we didn't want to have to worry about that ever again. So we put everything under the ground, talked to the electrician. I think we had to go 3 feet. I can't remember for sure. We do have a frost line, and I don't know if that makes a difference or if it's just a code thing that we had to do. Our electrician also required, because he's a certified electrician, he has to follow certain codes. That Schedule 40, I think it is, gray pipe, we did have to put that around in the trench and then run the wire through the pipe. Not everybody sees the need to do that, but on the other hand, if down the road you decide you need to trench something else or dig, and you forget that wire is there, that plastic is at least going to give you a little bit of a heads up, hopefully, especially if you're just trenching. And you might hit the plastic before you hit the wire and have a huge problem. So we did it to the house. We went to the garage, but we also did an offshoot to the chicken coop. That might be the 4th line, honestly. And we don't need that much electric going to the chicken coop, but it was just convenient at the time because we already had a trench part way. So that was phase 1, the house, the garage, and the chicken coop. Trenching, putting the PVC down. I'm not even sure if it's called PVC anymore. And then laying the wire pulling the wire through the PVC. And then you have to hook it up into your building. Phase 2 was putting it underground to our granary, which actually that was kind of backfed through the barn and the machine shed there. And we did that, like a couple years later, because it's not a cheap project. And like I said, everything's underground now, so we don't have to worry about wires coming down. We do still have some wires, like that one we need to take down, that pole we need to take down, and the wire to the corn crib we need to take down. And we have a lot of messy areas. This is the barn, it blew away, so we rebuilt it. And then here's our wire coming in. So we have a wire, we were able to put some concrete in here. So we have a ground wire, one coming in, I think this is the inline, from the main box, and then one transferring down to the machine shed, because the machine shed doesn't require a lot of amperage. And then you have your box. And one thing I never thought of when doing electric is making sure you have enough breaker spaces, I should say. And then you need to make sure that you have enough voltage or amperage or whatever within each breaker. Like one of these lines, it might be this double pole, no. So we have a 30 amp double breaker going to the granary, and a 50 plus 15, it looks like, going to the machine shed. And make sure you label this. Our house is labeled, but it's nowhere near right. So we also have a specific breaker for the outlet for our water tank heater that pulls a lot of energy. We have a breaker for lights. We only need one breaker for lights in here. And then one of these and we will probably never use it out here, but one of these goes to, oh, this is, outlets. These came from reusing stuff, but somewhere in here, I thought, maybe it's not in here. But if you're ever gonna have a welder, you want a designated outlet and breaker, designated breaker for that outlet, because that can pull a lot. And if you have too many things on one breaker, you're gonna pop the breaker and not be able to use it. I am not a fan of fuses. There's plenty of old houses and farms that are on fuses. I'm just not a fan. They still work for some people, but they're not my preferred thing. And then from the barn, because we just trenched one line to the barn, but we ran a dedicated line to the machine shed because odds are the machine shed isn't going to really be pulling too much amperage, but it does have its own line. The only hard thing is with the way that this machine shed was, we couldn't come up from the bottom. There's concrete right here, so we did have to run a tube up the side and put an LB joint in here, which wasn't, you know, looks like I might need to recaulk it. Actually, aesthetically it's not great, but it works. But like I said, I don't know a ton about electric, but I do think people need to be more aware of it, where it's going, how it's being used. Like my house, if you saw my how to use a whole chicken video, you don't know when you're going to start flipping breakers unless you know how things are mapped out. And I think that's the major thing, is just knowing how it's mapped out, making sure you have enough power there. It's kind of like, how do I want to, it's kind of like a water hose. If you only have one spigot or one hydrant, one place you're sourcing the water from, and you want to get it to 4 different places, you can only get so much water to 4 spaces versus 1. So if you only have, 10 gallons a minute from one hose, you're going to get 10 gallons a minute from that one in that one location. But if you have 4 hoses, you're spreading that 10 gallons between 4 different places. And at some point, it just can't keep up, or you're not going to get the amount of water that you want. So electricity is kind of the same thing. The safety is huge. Like I said, we put it underground because we didn't want to have to worry about the lines being overhead. We do still have some lines overhead that we just need to take down. They're not live. We have one line that's still in the air going from the machine shed to the corn crib, but it's pretty, we don't hardly ever use electricity in the corn crib. So it's not that big a deal, even if we lost power to the crib. But I just wanted to give my perspective on it, why we put it underground, things to think about if you're needing an electric project or an electric upgrade. Like I said, I'm not like a professional or anything, so there's plenty of things that I'm sure I'm forgetting that should be addressed, especially by your electrician. And some people could have done this completely by themselves. I needed some help. I needed some help. I needed motivation. I needed someone to come here and get it done. Especially if it was during when I was working or whatever, that's a hard balance to find when you're trying to save money and do things yourself, but you work and there's 100 other projects that need done. At some point, sometimes I have to remind Colton, as much as he can and wants to do things, we don't have the time. Or it takes 6 years. We have to realize that we are only 2 people. We have full-time jobs. We have a full-time kid. And at some point we have to weigh, is this a project that we can do, or we need to hire it done and pay the money? There are plenty of things that we could do to save money, plenty of projects to do that can save money. But in this case, this was definitely something that was well worth paying an expert, paying someone who's efficient and knows what needs done, and the best way to route things, over us trying to debate on how to do it. So if you guys have any questions, I'll do my best to answer. But like I said, I'm not an expert. I'm not a certified electrician. I just know that you got to plan accordingly. And my kid is about to swing into the tree, so I'm going to wrap it up. I'll catch you all later, and I hope you have a good day. Bye, guys.